Everyone. I'm going to continue reading Little Rascal. And when we left off last time, we left off with the boy finding his sister's wedding ring and giving it back to her. And then she was leaving the house. So the last thing I read was Theo was so happy to have her ring. That was the boy's sister, that she did not insist that I take my canoe to the barn. Remember, he's building a canoe in the house. She even postponed the hiring of a full-time housekeeper. She merely fed us delightful meals and, with Jenny's help, left the house shining clean. Then, with a goodbye kiss and a wave of the hand, she was off again, gallant, beautiful, and brave, her auburn hair shining in the sun. So let's continue. Summer passes all too swiftly for an active boy of 11. Rascal and I often went fishing below the dam in the river at Indian Ford. Sometimes I cast for bass and pickerel among the water lilies. More often I fished for big fighting silver catfish in my favorite hole below a pleasant sandbar in the river. Rascal, meanwhile, fished in the shallows along the edge of the bar, often seizing a crayfish, those little monsters that look so much like small freshwater lobsters. These he washed and ate, tail first, with oblivious delight. Are having a good old time. They're both fishing in their own way. Despite mowing lawns and working in my war garden, I always found time to read. Very good. Lying in the hammock and listening to all the sounds of summer, the clip-clop of horses' hoofs, the shrilling of the cicadas, and the murmuring of the birds. On a few gala occasions, my father would hang a sign on the office door, "Gone for the day." Then, with a picnic basket filled with sandwiches and a few bottles of cold root beer and pop, my father and Rascal and I would clamber happily into the front seat of the big 7-passenger Oldsmobile with the top back and the windshield down. Oh, they're having a good old time. All three of us wore goggles, Rascal's being natural, of course. He liked to perch between us on the back of the seat. See Rascal perched between the two of them on the back of the seat, gazing joyfully ahead as my father shifted from low into second and from second into high, speeding up the river and toward Lake Koshkonong. Here we hunted for Indian arrowheads, explored the little cave in the limestone at Taylor's Point, or swam in the cold water. Rascal, although only 3 months old, was an excellent swimmer, dog paddling along beside us until he grew tired. He considered me his natural protector when we were in deep water and would climb on my shoulder or my head for a rest. Often I would float on my back and arch my chest above the water to give him a better resting place. As soon as he had caught his breath, he would dive in again and paddle along bravely through the little waves as we explored the coves and grassy points along the sandy shore. Look at the two of them. That's fun. He got a nice spot, didn't he? Right on his chest. Rascal had never been told about turtle eggs, but on our very first trip to the lake, his keen nostrils told him that somewhere in this sand was a delightful form of food he had never before tasted. He dug furiously to bring up the eggs, nearly as large as golf balls. They had been laid by a big snapping turtle and left in the warm sand to hatch. Rascal tore the eggs open with his sharp little teeth and gorged until he could not eat another bite. Then for hours he slept blissfully on the back seat of the car as we visited several of my father's farms to see how the crops were growing. Toward the end of July 1918, we had heard that the fighting was particularly fierce and bloody on the battlefields of France, our town was suddenly aware of the danger to the American army as the Germans made their last great drive toward Paris. More gold stars began to appear on the service flags in the windows. I can remember praying that the one star on our service flag would not turn to gold and that my beloved brother Herschel would somehow come home safely. There was a great upsurge of patriotism among all the children of Brailsford Junction. The girls were knitting khaki wristlets for the soldiers, and the boys were competing to see who could collect the largest ball of tinfoil. I had a little helper in this search. Because tinfoil is shiny, Rascal would trundle up one gutter and down another, looking for the gleaming bits of foil. His only other assistance in the war effort was the help he gave me in the garden. When I hoed, he followed along behind me like a little dog. He also helped me pick peas, but all the peas he picked, he kept for himself, opening each pod as though it were a small clam and avidly shelling the green pearls into his mouth. Look at Rascal. He is a rascal, isn't he? One serious mistake I made, however, was to give Rascal his first taste of sweet corn. So that's the corn. I twisted a plump ear from a stalk, stripped back the husk, and handed the corn to my pet. He went mildly crazy over sweet corn and soon learned to pull down a stalk and help himself to ear after ear. No other food he had ever tasted compared with this juicy new delicacy. When I told my father about Rascal's amusing antics, he said, "I'm afraid you are in for trouble, Sterling." And he was right. Night after night, Rascal left my bed and rambled around the neighborhood, raiding nearby gardens. It was not long before an angry delegation came to our house to protest. They sat in comfortable chairs around my canoe in the living room, sizzling with anger in the August heat. "I seen that varmint's tracks right in my garden," said Cy Jenkins, the skinflint lumber dealer. "Like the 7 plagues of Egypt," rumbled Gabriel Thurman, the fiery-tempered minister of an odd little congregation. The threats came whizzing around us like the buzz of angry hornets as Rascal huddled in my lap for protection. "I'll set a trap, so help me. Next moonlight night, I'll shoot him." "Now, just a moment," my father said quietly. "I have a suggestion." Mike Conway was willing to listen. "What do you suggest? If Sterling buys a collar and leash for his raccoon—" "Not enough," Cy Jenkins growled. "And builds him a cage," my father added. Rascal began to whimper and looked anxiously from face to face. Reverend Thurman glowered at my father and thundered, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." This struck Mike Conway as amusing. He threw back his head and roared with laughter as the minister grew purple with rage. Soon everyone except Reverend Thurman and Cy Jenkins was laughing. "Well, it's settled then," my father added, "a collar, a leash, and a cage." After the neighbors were gone, I said bitterly to my father, "Jails are for criminals, not for good little raccoons." "Won't need to build the cage just yet," my father said soothingly. "We're going for a 2-week trip way up north to Lake Superior. How would you like that?" "Do you really mean it?" I asked. "Of course I mean it. You can ask the Conway boys to take care of your war garden and feed Wowzer." I snatched Rascal from the rug and started dancing crazily around the room. We had been given a delay, a wonderful 2-week reprieve. "When can we start, Daddy?" "Why, tomorrow, I suppose," my father said. "I'll just put a sign on the office door." It took us 2 days to reach Lake Superior, which is 300 miles north of our village. I had never seen such a large body of water, sapphire blue and clear and cold. It stretched away like a vast ocean into the distance. On its clean gravel shore, we found more than 20 semi-precious stones, known as agates. On the outside, agates were often pitted and revealed no evidence of their inner beauty. Some of the ones we found, my father later sent to a lapidary to have cut and polished. Was a secret I would not learn until Christmas. We made our permanent camp several miles back from the lake on a little river known as the Brule. It is one of the most beautiful trout streams in the world, and it winds its way through forests of pine and spruce and hemlock, dashing between granite boulders as old as the world, or moving gently through deep pools where the big trout lie waiting for the fisherman's fly. We made our camp in a lofty grove of pines, spreading our blankets on the thick layer of fragrant pine needles. We could see the stars twinkling through the overarching boughs and hear the wind sighing gently through the treetops. Every morning we awoke refreshed and happy to be alive. We took our morning dip in the pool below our camp and cooked our bacon and eggs on a safe little campfire built on a bare ledge of granite that extended into the stream. My father had legal business to attend to in the city of Superior, Wisconsin. So each morning he took his packet of documents and went to court sessions in the big town some 20 miles away. Rascal and I were left to wander and adventure as we pleased. Recent rains had made the forest safe from fire. We had seen no signs of bears, though a few inhabited the woods. My father knew that Rascal and I could swim like otters if we accidentally fell into a deep pool, and we could scarcely get lost if we stayed along the river or one of its tributaries. One day we found a patch of delicious blueberries as big as grapes. Those were some big blueberries. Rascal helped me pick them, but ate every one he picked. On another day, we followed a tributary to the Brule to its source, a little lost lake as round as a dewdrop. There we saw the first doe and fawn we had ever seen in our lives. Look at the doe and the fawn. So a doe is the female and the fawn is her baby. So let me start that sentence again. There we saw the first doe and fawn we had ever seen in our lives, wading among the blossoming water lilies. On other days, we fished and caught our share of fair-sized trout, but as yet we had caught none of the monster brown trout that I could often see when the sunlight slanted deep into the water. On the last day of our precious 2-week vacation, my father borrowed a canoe from the only cottager who lived along this stretch of the river, and we went cascading down the stream, casting our wet flies into the deeper pools. A noisy kingfisher disputed our right to these waters. A mink appeared momentarily on the shore. Rascal stood at the prow of the canoe, enjoying every moment, and sometimes turning to give a word of advice, as though he were the pilot. I thought how thrilling it would be when I had finished my own canoe. Rascal and I would be afloat every possible moment. Rounding a bend in the water, we came upon a blueberry patch which looked as though it had been hit by a small cyclone. Then we saw an old rotten tree ripped to shreds with the honeycomb of wild bees strewn across a gravel bar. Bears, my father said softly. Around one more bend, and there they were. The mother bear was fishing in the rapids below the pool and had just tossed a big trout to her 2 cubs. So see, and look at the cubs, they have that big trout in their mouth, who were snarling and snapping at each other over the fine breakfast. Rascal trimmed it a little when he saw these 3 big, fierce cousins among blocking our passage down the stream. When the mother bear saw us, she growled a deep warning. Then, calling to her cubs, she dashed off through the willows and aspens with a great crackling of branches. In a few moments, all was quiet again along the little river. Rascal and I had already seen our first doe and fawn, and now we had seen our first bear and cubs. I thought nothing could top this moment of excitement, but in the very next pull, I hooked a huge trout, which I had to fight for nearly 20 minutes before bringing it in, gleaming and radiant to my landing net. By the little scale in my tackle box, this handsome trout weighed just over 4 pounds, almost exactly the weight of my 4-month-old raccoon. Rascal's high trill as I landed the fish was like a cheer of triumph. That night, a cold rain whipped through the forest, and we hastily gathered our gear and slept uncomfortably in the car. Next morning, we started home through the rain-washed air, a little stiff and damp, but wonderfully refreshed by our 2 weeks in the magnificent North Country. So I'm going to stop there today, everyone, and that ends the first section in the book about summer. Remember, I told you on the first time reading that the book is broken up into 4 sections: summer, and what season comes after summer, autumn. Some people call it fall. So the next session is called autumn. And then we know spring comes after autumn, and then summer. And the seasons just repeat. So thanks for listening today, and tune in next time for part 3.